Before you offend everyone in the room, let me go on to Catherine and give her a few minutes.
I agree. I think that with the last point John made about as a hack, particularly about the kind of climate in which you mustn't cause offence. I think where free speech is concerned, I think you sort of expect that some governments, some rich people are always going to try and multiply the numbers of exceptions that there are always going to be to complete free speech, and that they're going to push the boundaries. And it's sort of obviously there has to be total vigilance about that. Where I didn't really think we had to be that vigilant, I suppose, until quite recently, was in journalists and people who would call themselves progressives themselves censoring speech. And I think increasingly you see people who would certainly say that they were against suppressing thoughts and repression and against censorship, actually themselves deciding that something is so reprehensible that another exception has to be made for that. And I think generally there's a tendency to forget the whole point about freedom of speech that Orwell made, that it is actually the right to tell people what they don't want to hear. It's not the right to have your own worldview confirmed. And I think some of these people are sort of so active now that, yes, they make Mrs. White House look like an amateur, really. And I've made a very short list. But I mean, this is the kind of thing that people who certainly come from the left, think of themselves liberal in favour of free speech, have recently tried to ban or supported bans on. There was that, I mean, this came from the government, but that American shock jock, Mike Savage. Well, no one had heard of him. I hadn't, well, sorry, they had. I hadn't heard of him. You know what he was. He didn't even want to come here. But, there was remarkably little protest very recently when the ban on him entering this country to do whatever he would do was continued for another year.
Martha Stewart.
Martha Stewart. And another one, the Danish cartoons. We weren't allowed to see those. A lot of people, again, progressives, thought that was the right thing to do. Jan Moyer, I am party pre, I'm a hack. But, the idea that the PCC had to say the price of freedom of expression, that commentators and columnists may say things which other people may not agree with, which other people may not agree, may find offensive or may consider to be inappropriate. And the fact that they have to say that is extraordinary, I think. There have been people trying to stop climate change deniers going on the Today programme. A lesbian writer called Julie Bindell has another part of the LGBT movement doesn't want her to have a platform because they don't agree with what she says. The homophobic cleric Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, if I got that right, the people who don't want him to have a platform. Carol Thatcher, all Israeli academics, Islamists who want to walk through Wooden Bassett, Frankie Boyle on What the Week, Rod Liddell. People don't want him to edit a newspaper because they don't like stuff he's said. Geert Wilders probably mispronounced that, and the BNP, of course, on Question Time. And I think that was particularly a good example of this because you had people who you absolutely had marked down in your head as being liberal, supporters of free speech, who benefited from it themselves, fought against repression. Peter Hain, Ken Livingstone, who thinks Sheikh al-Qaradawi should be allowed to come and talk about, say, homophobic things on a platform, saying this was dreadful. And I think what's really irritating about that is they're so patronising because they know what the BNP are going to say. They haven't been inflamed by it. They haven't sort of gone out and smashed people's houses up. But if everybody else hears it, we're all going to think it's absolutely fantastic, and we're going to join the BNP. And of course they were wrong anyway about that because in fact support for the BNP went down from I think 11% to 9%, and also the number of people who thought they should not have been given a platform shrank as well significantly after they appeared. But I think fortunately they were proved wrong about the BNP. But I do think a lot of this sort of unofficial repression is actually having a result. It means there's a climate in which you just don't want to say something that's going to lead to you being the person who gets 25,000 people complaining to the press council because you've expressed an opinion they don't like.
So Catherine is a supporter of irresponsible speech and opposed to the journalists who intimidate themselves and others from exercising their rights of speech.